Hello, dear friends, colleagues. To your attention today is a presentation on the topic specific features of the use of augmented reality technologies in the process of the development of cognitive component of future professionals' mental capacity. The authors of the presentation are Hanna Varina, Viacheslav Osadchyi, Kateryna Osadcha, Svetlana Shevchenko, Iryna, Bulakh. The reporter is Hanna Varina. The processes of socialization, education, and professional activity in the conditions of society transformation are accompanied by an unprecedentedly rapidly changing information infrastructure in everyday and business life. The current phenomenon of modern society is a continuing formation of new knowledge and competences. Human existence in various communicative areas requires permanent mastery of new ways of communication and interaction at all levels. Technological innovations affect almost all areas of human activity. They are especially important and relevant in the field of education. The digital agenda of Ukraine 2020 states rapid and profound consequences of the transition to digitalization will be possible only when digital transformation becomes the basis of Ukrainian society, business, and government institutions. When it comes to a commonplace and everyday phenomenon, becomes our DNA, our key agenda on the path to prosperity will be the basis of Ukrainians' well-being. The aim of this study is to analyze the features of the integrative use of augmented reality technologies in the development of the cognitive component of the mental performance of a future professional in the context of adaptance. An empirical study focused on the use of augmented reality elements in the process of the development of cognitive component of future professionals' mental capacity was conducted in 2020 on the basis of Bogdan Khmelnytsky Melitopol State Pedagogical University. This interdisciplinary research is a logical construct of cooperation between leading scientists of the Department of Psychology and the Department of Informatics and Cybernetics of Bogdan Khmelnytsky Melitopol State Pedagogical University. The structure of the study is based on the research work which is performed at the expense of the general fund of the state budget. Adaptive system for individualization and personalization of professional training of future specialists in blended learning. The state registration number is 012-OU101970 and research topic of the Department of Psychology. Psychological principles of actualization of responsiveness and vitality of personality, conceptualization and development. The first year students who are future psychologists took part in the research. The sample was randomized. The total number of the respondents in the experimental and control groups was 58 people. The sample was formed using the stratometric method with representative modeling. The general scheme of the empirical research was split into the following stages. Ascertaining stage. Taking into account the peculiarities of social isolation in the conditions of pandemic quarantine caused by COVID-19, the psychodiagnostic unit was carried out using Google Forms. At the stage of ascertaining and controlled psychodiagnostic examination, the following techniques were used. Assessment of attention selectivity, dot cancellation test, Bogdan test, research of analytical thinking, research of short-term memory span and author's questionnaire, analysis of pedagogical conditions of AR technologies used in the process of developing future professionals' mental capacity. Formative stage. The main idea of the formative impact of AR technologies was the hypothesis that they have a positive impact on the development of cognitive component of mental capacity. The attention was paid to the opportunities of augmented reality technologies use in the process of distance learning on the Moodle platform. On the example of the course, Introduction to Spatiality Psychology, for the first-year students of Spatiality Psychology. At the formative stage, we analyzed the psychological and pedagogical determinants and future professionals' readiness for the implementation of augmented reality elements into the educational process. Taking into account the psychological and pedagogical conditions of AR technologies introduction in the educational process in higher educational establishments, in order to form a cognitive component of future professionals' mental capacity, we have analyzed the possibilities of implementing elements of AR technologies at three levels: competence-oriented, structural cognitive, and emotional-reflexive. At the competence-oriented level, the experimental group of students, 30 people, were offered to search for an independent solution of problem-based tasks using AR technologies. At the structural cognitive level, students were offered AR simulators aimed at the cognitive processes activation, development of attention stability, analytical thinking, and logic. They expand short-term memory span and increase endurance and mental capacity. Assessing the effectiveness of creating psychological and pedagogical conditions for developing mental capacity based on the integrated implementation of AR technologies in the educational process, it should be noted that we have noticed some positive changes after the research work has been conducted. Thus, the table demonstrates the outcomes of the research work, and it shows a positive dynamics of changes and the conditions associated with the effectiveness of the learning distantly and implementation of AR technologies. Experimental group students mention that with the use of interactive technologies, their classes have become more informative and meaningful. They have changed their perception of a teacher and the requirements. In particular, students emphasize that they have become more conscious of their intellectual activity due to the motivation for learning. They acquired skills of rational organization and planning of their own mental activity, and most importantly, mastered basic techniques and methods which help them perceive, process, and internalize learning material. The organization of appropriate research work based on the above-mentioned changes in psychological and pedagogical conditions had a positive impact on the indicators of all components of experimental group students' mental capacity. As it can be seen from the table, students of the experimental group demonstrated a significant increase of the quantitative indicator of a high level of cognitive component of mental capacity. This indicates the mobilization of students' mental processes, formation of skills necessary for the successful performance of intellectual tasks. These students also showed an increase in the development of critical thinking, perseverance, and independence in assessing their capabilities in the process of mental activity fulfillment. They showed productive performance of intellectual tasks. They are fluent in the amount of educational material, capable of generalizing and systematizing it, and it allows them to successfully study in a higher educational establishment. In order to identify the correlations between the levels of development of cognitive component of future professionals' mental capacity, we used Spearman's rank correlation coefficient, 0.6. Our research allows us to emphasize a high degree of relevance and demand for the use of new technologies in the field of higher education, as well as to state that AR technologies are being actively implemented in the educational component of higher educational institutions. According to the results of an interdisciplinary study on the use of augmented reality elements in the process of organizing learning activities on the distance learning platform Moodle, it was found out that students gained skills which are necessary for their adaptation to a new intellectual and educational environment. They became more optimistic using basic adaptive mechanisms. Due to these changes, there was an increase in the level of development of main components of first-year students' mental capacity. The level of stability and selectivity of attention, short-term memory span, development of analytical thinking, level of development of special qualities required for mental activity, formation of students' mental work culture and skills of their mental activity organization, which allows them to successfully carry out intellectual activities in higher educational establishments. Thus, the obtained data make it possible to state the feasibility and high efficiency of the introduction of AR technologies in the process of developing future professionals' mental capacity.